Welcome to Project Synapse, our weekly discussion of artificial intelligence with John Penard, financial executive and security expert. John, welcome.
Good morning.
And Marcel G, author, consultant, open source, and now an AI expert. Welcome, Marcel.
Good morning.
And me, singularly unqualified, author, podcaster, consultant, musician. I feel like that John le Carre novel, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. But all three of us have been deeply immersed in AI, and I want to stress this, not as a theory. Like, we're doing this day to day in our personal and our work lives, and immersed, obsessed. I'm not quite sure which one it is.
I'm going with obsessed. I'm going with obsessed
too. But we've been meeting for weeks to try and keep up in our own discussion with this tsunami of information. And I guess several weeks ago, 6 or 7 or whatever, if that's probably how many years is that? If 6 or 7 weeks, how many years is that in AI talk?
60 million.
Yeah. But we've been doing that to try and keep up and have that discussion. And we started sharing it, and it actually became fairly popular. You may decide otherwise when you've heard us for 30 minutes. Somehow a lot of people do think that it's been useful. So we've been sharing that information. And you talk about the tsunami of information, because one of the things, and John, was it you who gave me back I put the list of things that happened this week. And as I was preparing it, I went, I'm still forgetting a pile of stuff. And John, I think, sent me a note last night saying, this is going to be overwhelming.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Welcome to overwhelming land. It really was an incredible week. And anyway, what we put together was the framework that we have as we go through what's happened in the week. We try to stay focused to just updating that based on some of the things that you've said in the audience. We try not to play inside baseball and define some of the terms so that people are on a level playing field if you're listening to this. That's not always possible. Sorry if we do. But if we mess up and we put something in there that you can't figure out, put a note in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or send me a note. My contact information will be at the end of this. And I'm sure these other two guys are on LinkedIn as well. So you can send us a question and we'll try to answer it to the best of our ability. So,
and if you have fashion suggestions, we'll take those too.
I picked up Red Green's old wardrobe manager, and he's been running the show wardrobe for me. It seems to be working.
Choose winter wardrobe is he goes into the store and he picks up 12 different colors of the same shirt.
I'm gaining a little weight. My wife looked at me and said, those plaid shirts get a little tight. Oh, so I know what I'm getting for my birthday. Bigger shirts.
Plaid.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm certain. I'm absolutely certain the new plaid. I do t-shirts in the summer. Yeah. It's not like I have one wardrobe.
That's why I said this is your winter wardrobe.
Sounds like I'm hibernating. Anyway, let's go through the top stories for this week. DeepSeek at the end. No, actually there was more that happened, but so much happened on DeepSeek. I thought after last week that we'd seen the limit of how much we could absorb. This week, a lot came up in there. The first was the attacks, right? Everybody had to prove they could attack it. And to which my question was, duh, it's an AI model. Hello, yes, you were able to hack it. Yes, you were able to get the system prompt, just like people did for OpenAI, just like they've done. I do believe that they got Anthropic's system prompt too.
I've never seen the whole system prompt, but you get enough of it that you recognize what it is they've got in there.
Yeah, I did an interview with a guy who walked me through the process. If anybody's interested in this guy from Walmart's got a bit of an accent, and there's nothing wrong with that. I was struggling to listen to him myself, but it was so engaging to talk about how he'd hacked it. At the end of that conversation, I said, why don't you tell me more about how you did it? And he said, I can't, because we haven't notified the other models yet. And we think they're just as vulnerable. And this is with all of the attacks that we had, There's been a lot of this is rumors and not the Fleetwood Mac album, just for anybody who's old enough out there. But this guy from Walmart talked about, did they really use OpenAI to train DeepSeek? Yeah, probably. He couldn't tell for sure, but yeah, probably. And I think we all agree on that. We all learned a new word last week, distillation, which is where you get a big model to teach a small model. Great thing in there. So that was, and then this whole bit of rumors came up on DeepSeek, which was DeepSeek lied. God forbid.
Say it ain't so.
Lies. What? Yeah, I know. All of these companies tell us the truth, whether they're Chinese or American, I'm sure. And people said they had more GPUs than they said. And then I did something that I think everybody will, but Marcel will probably thank me for. I listened to an entire Lex Friedman podcast with two very
hats off to you, buddy. Like that, we're talking 3-4 hours of podcast.
Oh yeah, no, I sat there for 4 hours and went through with two huge experts, and these people know what they're talking about. I went through with who's the guy who was another big piece that, and he was what's his name? It'll come to me. Ahmad Mustak. He's the stability, and he did a whole 1 hour thing again because after 4 hours of Lex Friedman, I had to go for another hour of a fascinating guy. But what I'm getting at, these are severely intense technical people. They know what they're talking about, and they're saying most of what you're hearing is BS. And I have to agree with them. My favorite network, Chuck, which I love. Do you listen to Network Chuck, Marcel?
I do not.
This guy's really cool. Got a huge beard. He's a Linux expert with a beard. How likely is that? Yeah. He's in love with the command interface and drinks tons of coffee during this thing. Again, if you're willing to watch people do this, it's all out there. So I watched him out the whole of DeepSeek, get it up and running, and then check it to see if it was pinging out anywhere. And at least in that, not calling anything. So now, is it possible to hack these, that there's code hidden in this? Absolutely. Just like there was a backdoor in Linux somebody found 3 weeks ago, I think a couple weeks ago,
First of all, I'm going to jump in here. First of all, Linux is an operating system. There is the Linux kernel, okay, but it's the operating system. And like people have found things like a bug in SSL, and they said, "Oh, it's a backdoor in Linux." It's not. It's actually a backdoor in SSL. I'm using SSL as an example. I'm not specifically pointing to a particular thing, but because all of this is encapsulated in what's called the Linux distribution, people say there's a bug in Linux. So sometimes you got to pinpoint these things. And the same thing is true with the language models. They're talking about the model itself versus the inference engine that delivers the information on the back end that responds to your queries and spits out an answer and so forth. The model itself is an entirely different thing. Like the model isn't something that is typically coded with hidden messages or backdoors or whatever, because it's just the memory. It's what it refers to get you information. It's the multiple connections in your brain and so on. Yeah. Something else has to happen on the front end and the back end to get to this whole backdoor nonsense.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point. This is nuanced, and just massive statements about this or that, or the Chinese are going to control it, or it's got this in it and all that, are useless to us. I've heard people arguing, and I said this last week, don't let your employees connect to DeepSeek. Which one? Don't let them dial into a Chinese company hosted on a Chinese server. And if that would be really dumb. And I said before, or a server in Arizona with a piece of software. Right. The Chinese can hack you. They don't have to be there to hack you. They're really good at it. And the Russians and people will download all kinds of apps that are killers and full of malware. Don't do that. The bad thing.
So a friend of mine actually jumped in, and John will appreciate this hopefully a little tiny bit, but he sent me a message saying, there's the proof your information is being seen and scooped up by the Chinese and so forth. They were hiding this, but we found the actual truth. They're not hiding it. When you go to the website and you look at the terms of service, it actually says, we collect all of your data and send it back, and we will use it for our own purposes here in mainland China. It's freaking welcomes.
There's nothing hidden about the fact that they see your data. Absolutely nothing.
No,
and even this thing about, there was a big thing about, there's the DeepSeek, there's the Chinese phone company, and it had been tossed out of the US because of ties to mainland China. Never mind the fact. Yeah, no, it wasn't Huawei. It was another little one that nobody thinks about. But they're all one company. It's all working. They're all working for the same guy.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that all of the transformers probably in our electrical network in North America were probably made in China and probably have an operating system in there but don't worry, be happy. But so they've got this thing, and it says, somebody said, we found on the login page that there was reference to this Chinese telco in there, and aha. And I went, oh, come on. Possible, but it's more likely somebody just copied the code from their sign-in sheet and took it over and used that code. That's the most likely thing that happens. But who cares? Don't give any app that you don't know, or you haven't proven, or you haven't vetted or hardened your corporate or personal information ever.
This kind of ties into some of the things that I've said previously, both on the show and at work, is you cannot automatically just hand off responsibility to anybody else, whether it's the action or the accuracy of the information coming back from AI, or whether it's in an Excel spreadsheet calculation or anything. You have to own that and make sure that what it's sending back is accurate. And it's no different that whether it's China, Russia, hell, the US does the same kind of thing. At one point, I don't know if it's still the case, but at one point, the US was getting to the point of saying any information you send into the States, they have access to. So it's really no different. That
there was a system and I'm sure it's got to still be in place, but there was a system in place that intercepted all emails in and out of the country and was scanning them for words that might imply that some nefarious activity was taking place.
Yes.
And of course, I can't remember what it was because it's so many years ago now. But I'd be
check
surprised.
With Elon. Check with Elon. He's probably got access to it.
Yeah. But that's what I was getting at, is that it doesn't matter what system it is. It doesn't matter what country you're hosting it in or whatever. You still have to be comfortable and own the responsibility of it.
That's what the whole thing kerfuffle. May have taken a long time to get there, but now let's look at the practical of what happened when we talk about this is an open source model. It can be exported. We know that people have looked at it in detail. I'm going to do something on cybersecurity today. I'm going to bring some people in to talk about going through this from a security point of view. And Marcel, you probably more of an expert in this than I am, but you can find these things. That's when I was using the Linux example. I was saying, you got a lot of eyes on stuff. People will find stuff, but they might not find it for a while. Mm-hmm. But eventually they will. And eventually this will get hardened. The software, because it is software, maybe a neural network and all that sort of stuff, still code.
Yep.
We caused it to happen on a computer. It's not walking around in somebody's head. We don't have to do brain surgery. But the other piece of this is now big players have taken this up. Did you guys notice Perplexity had adopted DeepSeek? And I don't know if they peeled it out again, because for the first time, when you ask Perplexity, it actually went, now, because they call this a reasoning model, right? It'll give you all of its reasoning. And I'd go on and do a search on Perplexity, which I just love and has been very helpful for me. And it's much better than the help text on anything or for help forums. So I'm using it all the time. And then it read me the entire world and it gave me its thoughts. And I'm going, I just really only wanted to know how to do this. That was going on for days. That's stopped now. They've gone back to a more like the old Perplexity.
The models I see, if I take a look at it right now, they've got their auto model, and of course Sonar, and nobody uses that, but they're listing Claude 3.5, Sonnet GPT-4o, and Gemini 2.0 Flash, as well as Grok 2. Those are the models that they have, or that they're admitting up front that they're using. I just briefly want to address a couple of the things around DeepSeek, the things that have been thrown around that are probably not true. First of all, this whole thing about $5.6 million, of course, we talked about this last week a little bit. Everybody fails to take into consideration the work that was done before, and that needs to be considered. There is hardware in the background. There are people. There is time. The 5.6 million is just the training phase for the model. So that's one thing. And then, of course, there are these things that are coming out right now. And of course, this is sending everybody in a wild panic. The idea that we trained it for $30 and then $6, and then somebody said something like,
I paid you $2.95 to train it.
That's right. $2.50. That's the most I'm willing to pay for it. And even
I said when we get
to
$6 Canadian, we're done.
But even that is BS, okay? And it's BS because what they're talking about, they say we recreated DeepSeek, and that's actually not what they've done. What they've done is they've recreated the so-called aha moment. where you basically set things in motion and the model at some point clicks in and says, aha, and then it starts to train itself. As opposed to reinforcement learning, these self-improving reinforcement learning takes over, that weird emergent property. That's the aha moment. And that's what you get to with $6 and $30 and so forth. You haven't trained the model yet. You've trained it on maybe a small number of parameters.
You've trained it on how to train
hardly
itself.
It's hardly a final product, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So sometimes I think we underestimate how much this is actually costing.
But that's where the flap on both sides of this comes up. Is it $5.6 million? The one thing I have established through the research that I've done, and I think reasonably intelligent people, the number of GPUs that they said they used was the number of GPUs. That's probably as accurate as you're going to get. So that $6 million to actually run that training run is probably accurate. And people say, yeah, but they've got all this hardware. Of course, OpenAI lost $5 billion last year. Does that mean that it cost them $5 billion to come up with 4.0 and 4.3? Is that what that's worth? Versus maybe the Chinese had $500 million, $10 million, $30 billion worth of GPUs sitting there? It's all irrelevant. The fact is faster, much, much faster, and much, much cheaper, and it's open source. And that's as accurate as we're going to get.
Oh, and there's another story that sort of, I don't know if you ran across it, that somebody effectively prompted DeepSeek to improve itself.
Yeah.
And it was able to improve itself by a factor of 2. Like the model was twice as fast as it was using far fewer resources. So effectively, not only was that aha moment reached in training where it was able to train itself, but it also is able to train itself to use less power. And one of the stories that I pasted last night, which popped up in my perplexity feed, we always use a million of these different things, right? Anyway, was the idea that not only, you remember how we had the stock market go bananas at the end of last week? Is, oh my God, like all this money being spent, NVIDIA crashes, not quite crashes, loses a small fraction of the $3 trillion that it was worth. Yeah, exactly. Now it's only worth $2.6 trillion instead of $3 trillion. But anyway, all this panic is now happening apparently in the energy market. Now, I want you to wrap your head around this thing, okay? So we've got all these people saying, oh, it's really bad that these models and these computers and these data centers are using all this energy and it's going to hurt the environment, blah, blah, blah. And then in the background, there are all these companies that are going, wonderful, it's going to require piles more energy. We're going to throw money into infrastructure and sell even more energy, and our stock price goes up as a result. DeepSeek, as it turns out, has managed to reduce the cost of a frontier level model by, I'm trying to remember now, I think it was like 30 times or something like this. And so the energy vendors are going nuts, going, oh my God, no, people are going to need as much power as they were going to need. So honestly, is it good or is it bad? And to what you were saying earlier, Jim, it all depends on who's making the case. Energy use by these things is really bad. The energy use now just dropped by a factor of 30. But, oh no, now that's bad. I'm sorry, but you said that it was bad when it was using too much power. Now it's using up 30 times less power and it's still bad.
But that's why short-term thinking on this just doesn't work. And I remember 2003 when the bubble burst and everybody said, oh, there's going to be a bubble, there's going to be a bubble burst. If you're buying stocks speculatively and you've got a time horizon you have to cash them in on, you really need to worry about bubbles. Because if you're going to put, and I've met people in 2003, put all of their life savings and their retirement money into some crazed sort of scheme coming out of Silicon Valley and lost it all. So
or a millennium meme coin.
Or modern meme coin. So if you can't outweight this stuff, or if you're going to be worried about losing $500,000 or something like that, you need to worry about bubbles if you're investing in this stuff.
There was all kinds of
speculatively
conversations about, I think Amazon was one and Meta was another that was talking about creating their own nuclear plants for energy. And now there's conversations about, oh, maybe we don't need all of that.
But that leads us to what happened. A bubble will get overbuilt.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be overbuilt because I have a lot of faith in what's happened, in what the Chinese have done, and this will all be adopted. They have taken the cost of running these models way down, 98% less, according to some stats, and they haven't stopped. And we had a great thing last week. This is when the economics of it matter. When people focus on this stuff, they'll make great strides. And again, Linux has been around for how long? And a couple of really bright people
They're
at
kids
Waterloo.
compared to us.
Well, no, but they were students, they were kids. But a couple of really bright people at Waterloo reduced the cost of Linux running by 30%. And there's another thing that happened in China last week, and it was, they had, and this was with old hardware, they had taken a model that you use for inspecting cracks and doing all of those big things in engineering projects. They got an 800 times faster. There's a paper out on it. Okay, the Chinese lie. It's only 600 times faster. It doesn't matter. The fact is that smart people will apply this. We moved a data center one time, and we had this whole thing back in the old days when you had to come back up with a financial institution. You had to come back up in the morning. There were people really upset if you didn't open in the morning, just one of those things. So we had this window that was an impossible window to move between one mainframe and another. And all of our best programmers worked on it. And then this guy that I didn't really like him. That's my boss of this, but he said, Jim, this was built by man at the time. You could say that, but built by person, I guess would be the modern equivalent in there. But by humans. Yes, it was built by humans, built by mortals, the better. Okay. And this guy came in, he knew nothing about our application. All of my programmers went, oh, come on. He knows nothing about our system. And that was actually a benefit. He took a new look at it. He said, why does this thread go this like this? Why does this do this? He had us down within the 8-hour window within 3 weeks. Something that was impossible when you're really close to it.
Yep.
As long as we thought that the only way to make AI smarter was to get more data and more compute, we were going to be caught in that paradigm, and somebody broke it.
And you can guarantee that OpenAI and all of the other AI companies are looking at DeepSeek going, how the hell did they do that? We've spent gazillions of dollars on hardware and everything else to get us to where we're at. How did they do it differently? And they're going to start looking to see how can they do the same thing? How can they get their costs down by making the model run more efficiently, or by making it run on smaller equipment or less powerful equipment? I think that regardless of where DeepSeek goes long term, it's going to have a huge benefit or result in a huge benefit to everybody else by figuring out how they did it.
We have this bad habit of focusing on costs, what things cost, and sometimes what are things worth. They're worth whatever you can get for them. And we fail to take into consideration the shoulders of giants effect, which is that basically DeepSeek built on the work that was done before. OpenAI built on the work of Google's transformer models. Like all of these people built on things of other people. We're so happy to talk about the amazing strides that artificial intelligence is going to make and how it's going to propel us into this wonderful future, blah, blah, blah. And then when it actually happens, everybody tries to come up with an excuse or an explanation for why it's happening. No, this is precisely what we predicted would happen with these incredibly smart things. The only thing that was holding us back is that we weren't smart enough to recognize that it would be possible for these advanced artificial intelligence systems to do things better than we would. So we were stuck in this idea, someday we're going to need nuclear-powered data centers in space, directly connected with massive solar panels to draw in energy to power these things. And of course, in these sub-zero temperatures of space, we're going to be able to keep the data centers cool enough to run all of this technology. No, maybe the technology that we're building is actually smarter than we are and is able to make leaps that we weren't able to make. And then it propels us further, faster, more efficiently, better, faster, stronger, to quote from a famous show.
But the problem that with all of this stuff, it disguises the seed of future change. And the seed of future change happened over this past weeks with what you were talking about, Marcel, the aha moment. And we saw this, although yes, people were doing small models and they weren't necessarily building the biggest, the whole big model, but it wasn't only happening there. We were starting to move beyond this idea. We're going to dump a whole pile of data into these. We're going to have human-led training. We're going to have human-led reinforcement. And suddenly the models were learning by themselves. Not a new, we've been doing that since Google did the Go thing where they taught a model to beat Go masters. And if anybody was a science fiction expert, if you really want to capture that different change in paradigm, read Ender's Game, the old science fiction novel. This idea has been around for a long time, where this kid becomes a genius because he looks at a problem differently. They looked at the problem differently, said, these things can train themselves. That was a sort of a great type of thing. Now that has come into reality, so you've got models that are now teaching themselves by playing multiple times, and you can find all kinds of examples of this. May get rid of a lot of the need for pre-training, which is really expensive from time and computation. And I don't think that goes away. If you start to run those big models that same way, you're going to have this problem of compute. But now when you get to this point where you get that aha moment, people miss this. These models, even in simple mathematical problems, we're going, oh, I'm going to try this solution. No, maybe that doesn't work. I'm going to try another solution. They were inventing their own strategies. Trial and error, but that starts to look like generalization the way we learn. How do we learn? You see a doorknob. You go, okay, I could try this. Nobody tells you how to operate a doorknob ever in your life. You look at it, maybe you watch somebody do it and you go, oh, I can try this. And then you see a new doorknob. It's not the round one. It's the lever one. Nobody gives you a manual that says you have to do this. You go, oh, that opens a door. I bet this is it. And they're starting to learn like us. That's interesting.
One of the things I found most fascinating is they had a couple of systems talking to each other to arrive at whatever it was. I don't remember what the reasoning for it was, but they started talking in Chinese because they were trying to speak more efficiently. And Chinese is a more dense information language than English. So in order to be able to arrive at solutions faster, they started speaking in Chinese. And then there was another example where Chinese wasn't fast enough. So they started basically creating their own language to communicate with each other because no human language was efficient enough for them to use. And then at that point, the whole train of thought thing becomes completely opaque to us because they're speaking some internal gibberish that makes no sense to us, but only makes sense to them.
Which apparently you can find a data set of that. It's an old science fiction thing of aliens talking. And they picked up part of that. No, I'm not saying that's the whole thing, but this is what I mean. They've got these are idiot savants that have read the whole internet. And so what they can create in an afternoon. Yeah. So we get to this point where models can learn and advance themselves. And as you were saying, Marcel, this is not unpredicted. People have been talking about that's going to happen for quite some time. So you've got that whole piece of it. And now they're more efficient. And the second thing, though, that happened that people keep ignoring, like they keep paying attention to whether we should log on to a Chinese software. This is open source now. This was a big deal. Open source software at the level of 4.0 and 4.3 of OpenAI is now available to anyone, anywhere.
Yep.
One of the things I've actually found for some research was there was actually a model that was leaked of ChatGPT, probably, I'm betting it's 3.5 or something like that people could find. So there have been things, and there are other open source offerings, Meta, Mistral, and a dozen others.
Quen.
Quen, another one. So but these are now out there and in everybody's hands. And the thing that happened to me this week that my heart almost stopped. I agreed with Mark Zuckerberg.
What?
Zuckerberg is actually stepping up, credit where credit is due, or whatever his reasoning is, and saying, we're going to really reserve the parts of our open source model that could be dangerous. And they've actually got a rating system. They're going to use people to do it. They're going to say, if it could do serious damage, we will not release it. And if it can do harm, but not serious damage, we're going to have some policies for it.
I agree with what you're saying about what Mark is. Let's get real meta here. What Mark is saying. But the fact is, what people thought would be harmful changes like practically week to week. If you remember when GPT-2 came out, they were talking about it being a model that was too dangerous to release. That just seems quaint now when you think about it. And because, as you just pointed out, so much of this is open source and out there. And of course, China, bless their black little hearts, have decided that in some ways, open source, and I have to admire this on some level in my open source heart. They've decided that the most disruptive thing that you could possibly do is release this technology open source, which is, if you look at all these companies, they're releasing all these open source models, not giving a damn for intellectual property, not giving a damn for impersonating people. The ByteDance released this model yesterday, UltraHuman or UberHuman or something like this.
Yep.
So something human.
We'll put a link. We'll put a link into it. But it is
UltraHuman
astonishing.
It is. Unlike, you guys know this. I'm a big fan of HeyGen for doing these sorts of things. And I've created versions of myself on the bridge of a starship or at a dude ranch or something like this. And it's very cool, but there is a limit to like these hand motions and stuff like this. And this model by ByteDance is like basically absolute. The movements are natural and normal. They're not just repeating the same motion over and over again.
Let's back up for anybody out in the audience in there. So you can take a single picture of someone and it will animate it. And I don't know what the length of the clip, what the restrictions on the length of the clip is, probably relatively short. But as you pointed out, careful demos aren't always what they turn out to be. But I watched a Taylor Swift video with her singing, and I could not tell that from the authentic Taylor Swift. I watched some other ones that clearly had to be fictional. Like you could fake part of that with Taylor Swift. I don't know. But some of these other ones.
The Einstein one was real. The Einstein one was totally real.
Yeah, I don't think Einstein's alive. So I don't think there's any great video of him looking 31 years old, making a speech. I think there probably is video of him being younger, but it blew me away watching it. And this is coming from the people who brought you TikTok.
There's some out there that I saw last night that it's not quite as fancy as that, but it takes like ancient artifact art, engravings and things, and you take a picture of it and it actually turns it into a video of an Egyptian piece of art that comes to life. And
I posted one of those in the Discord server. Nefertiti comes to life, and it's just freaky, amazingly good. Like it's just wonderful to watch. There's a series of there's so many people doing so many cool things out there.
I know.
I got to get a better invite for our Discord server. And I might just not be smart enough to do it, but we've got to get one out there because people are welcome to join us on this Discord server. And at the very least, you're going to see all the stuff that Danny pumps out into there, which is amazing for keeping you up to date because he apparently never sleeps. Sorry. So I got to remember, Marcel, you got to give me a link.
Promise you will send me a message as soon as the video goes up on YouTube. That's thing one. Thing two, I promise to make a comment at the top, which you will then pin, which will have the link to the Discord server. How's that?
That's perfect. Now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Anyway, what I was going to say is there are actually people doing. I don't know that anybody's really monetizing any of this in a big way at the moment. So let's just put all that crap aside for a moment. Sometimes when you're skipping through the tulips toward the future, you screw around, you just have fun, right? And there are people doing some amazingly fun things. And there's a series of clips where it's historical figures taking selfies of themselves. It's Nero with his phone in his hand, turning around and going, "Look, Rome is burning."
That's true.
He must have had a BlackBerry.
I don't know. I should check and see whether it had a QWERTY keyboard or not. These are so much fun. Or somebody who's on one of these Viking ships or something like that. And the gang is working really hard today, and they're all. And it's just this reimagining of historical events in a way that obviously didn't happen. And I think as more and more people start to have fun with this, and I know that there are the Luddites out there and the antis that freak out at this stuff, but there are a lot of people doing very cool things and having a lot of fun with this. And I think we can't overlook the fun, because at some point, making this stuff fun, making it available to everybody, TikTok videos of your dog singing, that sort of stuff, is going to bring it so hard into the mainstream that like a year from now, nobody's even going to think about this stuff. First of all, the technologies seem to be converging, as in this model is a little bit better this week than that one was last week, and so on. And at some point, we're going to get to some kind of a singularity point where everything is so amazing and so good that everybody is using it, and we don't even think about the fact that we're using these things.
So I'm going to do a Jimmy Downer here. I don't want to say Debbie Downer because that's sexist, but I'm going to do a Jimmy Downer here. This is absolutely true that this is great fun, but from the point of view of corporate security, fraud, cybersecurity, what happened with that Chinese piece is we're done now. There is no difference between reality, and I don't know how we're going to deal with this, because you can create a perfect video of someone.
Yeah.
We were already pretty good. Like, we were already at the point where you could fake almost anything. Now we're at the point where there is no history. You can literally turn any event into anything you want, or you can fake anything you want. And that's something we have to deal with. But the thing that I was going to say to wrap this up with all of the open source and all of this is, and I think you're right, Marcel, everybody talks about we're being driven by anger in the last social media series with the algorithms. Now we're being driven by fun. That's at least a plus.
Yep.
But the genie ain't going back in the bottle.
No.
Nope.
But you talk about security and these video recreations and things, all of this deep fake type thing that, when they first came out with Tom Cruise playing the guitar and singing, it was cute. It was actually pretty good. Nowadays, you call into your bank and they say, oh, you've been voice verified. You can't necessarily voice verify someone anymore if you've got these voice generators. You can't necessarily, you say, okay, then we'll have to do something on a video. How do I know for sure that Marcel and Jim, that's really you on the other side of this video? It's almost going to get to the point that if you want to do anything with your bank, you have to go back.
I'll give you a confession here. Last week, Marcel's mic was acting up. I'm hoping it won't be doing it this week, but Marcel's mic was acting up. Would you remember I got the video out late? I had to synthesize his voice about 35 times. So go back and listen to last week and tell me what's Marcel. Is it live or is it Memorex?
Are those the spots, Jim, where Marcel kept saying, Jim, you're the smartest man I know?
Yeah, no. I didn't make him say.
Or John, you're absolutely right. I don't know how I could possibly ever disagree with you.
That was it. Yes.
Yeah. But you can't tell where I had to fill in, mostly for individual words where something would happen, and you can't tell. So wrapping all, this is the last week that happened this week that just drove me crazy. And not drove me crazy because it was annoying, but it was like, I went, wow, we finally had a copyright ruling, one of the courts in the US, while they still have courts. Because the old rule was if it was AI generated at all, it had no copyright. And a new court ruling has come up that said, if there's a substantial human component or control, you can copyright the material. That's big. If you just type in a prompt and something comes out, that's not covered. So people are going to have to actually document their creative process and what they've got to prove that they have a copyright on this stuff. But that's an interesting thing that happened. And I think it's going to change a lot of stuff. A lot of people are going to be thinking about that. And of course, we'll have lawsuits and stuff like that.
So can Coca-Cola copyright their Christmas commercial? Because that was all AI generated.
Yeah, but substantial human intervention went into creating that commercial. So what Jim said there is interesting, because the idea of what is then substantial human input, like I have done songs like on Suno or something like that, where I have a 15-minute discussion with OpenAI or whatever model I happen to decide to use that day. And I'll spend 15 minutes discussing how I want this song organized and what elements I want into it and so forth. And then it will generate lyrics, and I'll say, I don't like the second verse. I'd like it to reference this material, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like I put in a prompt that said, make me a song.
Yeah.
What I did was I had a discussion that went on for a while, went back and forth with it, generated the lyrics, uploaded the lyrics to Suno, and then generated multiple versions on Suno, changing the instrumentation, changing the vocals, until I had something finally that I liked, and I decided that was the final product. At every step of the way, I was using AI, but at every step of the way, I was involved in it. And even this idea that you have to document your workflow, I think that's going to be extremely difficult. Because if I can synthesize Albert Einstein giving a speech 70 years ago and it looks good, okay, then I can synthesize me going through my workflow. I can make that shit up. So I don't know where this is going to go. I do agree with the ruling, though. I think the ruling is appropriate because this idea that you just say, create me a 1.5 hour long movie about 3 robots walking through the landscape, and then suddenly there's this completely coherent thing that comes out on the other end is bullshit. And a lot of people who don't understand artificial intelligence but are up in arms about how horrible and how awful it is for human creativity, don't stop to think about how much work goes into getting to that 6-second clip at the end of it, or a 5-minute clip or whatever. It's still work. It still requires thought until the AI is actually conscious and goes, oh my God, I have an amazing revelation about the meaning of life. And then it goes out to create this wonderful poem on its own that nobody ever asked for. Until that happens, we're still in the loop.
I just want to point out that when Marcel said what I said was interesting, I did not do that in the post-edit.
That was not synthesized.
Witness, I would have cleaned up his language in that last play.
Oh, sorry. This isn't a kid-friendly program, is it? We're allowed to say words like that.
Great, yeah. You can say shit if you like.
You say it.
Anyway, and that's how mature we are. But let's go back into this. I want to go back to the open source piece just in terms of the updates. We started last week's discussion with Europe investing like 52 million euros, which is about 57 million US, and a pile of compute. And that in terms of an open source system. But we ignored Mistral coming out.
Yeah.
And Mistral came back. And it's been this interesting European open source that came up. Marcel, you've been following that?
I have been, yeah. I've been following Mistral. They now have a full multimodal system that can do voice, that can do images and stuff like that, which nobody seems to have noticed. Maybe because they're out of France, and French people don't make waves, never raise their voices or anything like that.
And they also have an iOS app.
That really burns me.
Why? Because it came out before the Android one came out.
There should be an Android app out there. Now I do the fact that it's called Le Chat, the cat. I love it.
Masculine or feminine? That's what I want. Le Chat. Yeah.
Sha is it's masculine.
Yeah.
Or otherwise it's a chat, then it's a chat. La chat, le chat. See?
That potty mouth again.
That's the lesson.
He just shat himself.
I think I'll put that. I wanted to do like they do with the Lex Fridman thing. So if you're going to listen for 4 hours, he gives you this clip up front that's actually exciting. And then he talks on the show.
I listened to his program at 1.5 speed.
Yeah. So it was a hell of a week. Did anybody else pick up anything that I like that was exciting this week? Anything else happened?
The one thing, I mean, as you guys know, I'm more focused from work on Copilot. And I found it very interesting that they came out with, I guess it was last week, they were talking about DeepSeek, but it's okay because it was going to run on their Azure platform. But now they're talking about their Copilot Plus PCs are going to be tweaked to run DeepSeek locally, which I find really interesting because Microsoft has sunk a ton of money into OpenAI for this whole Copilot piece. And now they're getting in bed with DeepSeek as well. So I think
DeepSeek for local stuff on your local machine.
Yes. And I also wondered whether a lot of these companies, like Apple has talked about DeepSeek as well. And I'm wondering if they're looking at this as well as a means to be more sellable in the Chinese market.
Apple definitely is looking at DeepSeek for China.
Yeah.
They can't run Siri in China. They can't run an improved Siri. First, they have to improve Siri.
Yes.
And don't say anything if you're talking, but they have to improve Siri first of all, because it's trash and Apple has fallen hopelessly behind. Why? Because Apple insists on being able to run everything, or at least as much as they can, locally.
Yep.
So now they've got DeepSeek that they desperately need for the Chinese market, because with the tariffs, with the political tension, they could get wiped out in China. They're thought of as a very expensive phone. And people who think you see the iPhone and it's really great and the Chinese have nothing, BS. They have brilliant, wonderful Android phones in there, and probably their own operating system by now. I think they do.
They do
have their own operating system as well. So that's all. So now we serious competition, and they're looking at DeepSeek, but this might be a lifeline for them.
Yes.
As well. If you can get something that runs AI on the machine, you can satisfy what Apple wants to do, which is to keep as much in the control of their hardware as possible. We may see an improvement to Siri. I still cannot for the life of me figure out how the smartest company in the world got so stupid.
Yeah.
The last time we saw this happen was when Bill Gates woke up and said that famous memo out and said, we missed the internet. He didn't exactly say that, but oops, we've been paying attention to our own internal stuff and we missed the internet.
Yeah.
And to their benefit, Microsoft turned around in, I don't know, 6 to 9 months. Everybody said that their browser was trash, everything, but they just ground away until they got back into the internet. I see nothing like that happening at Apple, but Apple's so secretive, you might not see it if it was.
Yeah. But I've talking about Microsoft, I find it really interesting. And I think we're probably going to see this in a lot of other areas where Microsoft started out, they sunk a bunch of money into OpenAI to create Copilot and so on. But now it's a bit of a free-for-all that, wow, okay, so we've got Copilot, but let's do DeepSeek now and let's do this. And I wonder whether you're going to get more and more of these companies that are doing that. It's either take the best of each of these things to build something, or whether it's providing multiple offerings.
We lose sight, and by we, I don't mean the three of us, society loses sight of the fact that this is not a question of, did Apple do this wonderful thing? Did Microsoft do these wonderful things? I remember being at I was working as assistant then many years ago, and I remember going to see this conference where Microsoft was talking about the idea that, in our next version, like they had this big to do about in our next version, we're going to be able to put attachments to email messages. We at Microsoft came up with this. No, you didn't come up with this stuff. This stuff existed like a few years ago. I've been using it on an open source email package called Pine and Elm for years, and it's been working. And you guys suddenly have invented this thing. The point I guess I'm trying to get at here is that none of these companies work in a vacuum, and no country works in a vacuum. Much as they'd like to put up these protectionist barriers and so forth, everybody learns from everybody else. So all of this investment that OpenAI, people say maybe OpenAI threw all this money away. They did not throw the money away. The money that went into all this stuff, as much as it was, as much as Microsoft put in, as much as Amazon put into it, has all gone to push the field forward. And everyone, including those companies, and yes, the ones who come later, are going to benefit from these advances and the improvements and the efficiencies that come from these systems. This is not a sealed terrarium. This is a wide open ecosystem where everything interacts with everything else, borrows from everyone else to create what the next best thing is.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier too with DeepSeek, that all of these companies are going to benefit from the strides DeepSeek has come forward.
But the real question is not whether they benefit. I totally agree with you, Marcel. The real question is, and this has been the American way, and I'm sorry if I'm being critical of American, but this is the American business way, is that a lot of people develop a lot of things and they dump a lot of money into it, and a lot of open source things happen. And then as soon as they can, they try and make that proprietary. And that, I'm hoping that genie's out of the bottle finally, because it always has happened. people would scoop up the best stuff from Linux. They would scoop up the best stuff from everywhere else. They would scoop up AI from a Canadian university in Toronto, and they would gather all that stuff. And then they would say, now it's mine and I'm going to sell it to you. And
we did it.
Is that kind of
No,
like
you specifically
Panama
didn't do it.
or Gaza? Sorry.
don't go there.
The Gulf
with
the
technology.
Gulf of Denmark.
Yes.
The Gulf of Denmark, yes.
We stick with technology. I was just going to say that the idea that the genie can go back in the bottle is still, they're still going to try it. Josh Hawley, he's a total flake as a senator. The man's a total idiot, but he's still standing up and going, we should have a $1 million fine and 20 years in prison if you download DeepSeek. Excuse me? You suddenly woke up. Is this because you want to protect us? Or is this so that you can keep control of AI and be able to sell it to us all? That's the thing that happened. It's not that all of this money was wasted. I agree, it wasn't wasted. But the question is, are you going to be able to benefit from it in a monopolistic approach or not? And one of the places where I think Apple's going to have to move on this is because Microsoft could beat them at their own game of having the AI on the PC. And so this forces people to be competitive. The American technology does not like that. They like monopoly. And I don't think that's me being judgmental. If you read Peter Thiel or anybody else or watch what people are doing, they talk about, they want a monopoly. Competition, though, is a wonderful thing. I had a friend of mine who is now living in the US, sent me a critical note warning me that because I put a post up that said, is anybody else secretly glad that the Chinese seem to be stirring things up and winning at this OpenAI race in a minute, because they actually had an open AI. And I got this note back, and it's but the Chinese will take over and they will control and all that sort of stuff. I said, I'm not sure I feel any better about Elon Musk controlling me. So the problem is the people who want to control you, and our benefit is real competition, and open source has been driving that. And after all these years, I think that's a great thing.
Years later, I've been obsessed with the idea of open source, open technology, open hardware, open science. I've been obsessed with that stuff for like ever now. And nothing has happened in the world to convince me that this was a bad thing. And in fact, if anything, what I'm watching happening in the world, in the corporate world, and in the US in particular at these moments, just reinforces that for me. And people have suggested that DeepSeek is part of a Chinese psyop to upend or upset the American technological ecosystem and so forth. In which case I say, go China.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's competition. And being Canadian, and for the American listeners, I apologize. If the US were to actually wipe out our auto industry, and as Donald Trump has talked about, and manufacture all cars, I'm going to be the first one going, could we please have the Chinese electric vehicles in here at no tariff? They will be replaced.
Yep.
If, at least from the consumer point of view, or maybe Toyota will come in and build more cars here as they've done. But this has happened repeatedly as well. I don't know if people remember when Japan was going to take over, and they used to do things like, in terms of quality, they were manufacturing chips, and there was this famous story that may be apocryphal, may be true, but somebody said that they had needed a 99.97% quality on their chips that they shipped. And so the Japanese shipped them 0.3% of the load in a separate envelope, said, we don't know why you want these, but you can have the broken ones.
Yes.
And it was just, this thing is, we could have gone to 100%. But whether that was true or not, it scared the hell out of us all, both the US, and there were movies about it, and it made us better.
But that's also,
and that was
put big, huge tariffs on Hondas and all the rest of that were being imported. And it was for the same reason.
Yep. So we like competition when it's in retrospect, maybe. And that's the great thing that happened last week in technology. Because you're right, Marcel, if it's open and transparent and people can compete, that's a wonderful thing. It's going to make our lives better.
And there are technologies that you mentioned Japan, but there are technologies in other parts of the world that are like, we somehow have this weird idea that the US, because even we in Canada compare ourselves to the US on these things. We have this weird idea that the technology that's available there, and whether it's computers or whether it's trains or anything else for that matter, is the best in America. Like America makes the best that the world has. And that's just not true. There are things being done in other parts of the world, in Europe, in China, in Japan, in South Korea, like that are so far beyond anything that we have access to at the moment that it's really sad that we somehow have these blinders on that say, obviously, our stuff is the best. No, not necessarily.
Yep.
And I would like to see a lot more open exchange of technology, if only to push us forward in terms of some of the things that we have access to, more efficient vehicles, higher speed trains that take us from one part of the country to the other. Why the hell does it take 6, 7, 8, 10 hours to go from Toronto to Montreal? That's nuts.
Yep.
It should take an hour tops.
Yep.
We don't have that yet. And I was riding a bullet train in France almost 40 years ago that goes faster than anything we've got now. We could use a little bit of that inferior technology.
Yeah, we have this sort of distorted view that, Europe's behind, everybody else is, and we're the greatest. Not we, but North America. We try to take the sunshine from the US when we can. And we also have this feeling that we're not ahead of it. And like I said, most of the work on neural networks was done in Toronto. This big advance in Linux was done in Waterloo. There are huge advances that are happening all around the world, and they're great. The question is, that broke this week, and that's the thing that's been for me, is I'm very afraid of any one company who can control everything. And
Yes.
because they not only control what you get, what you use, they could control what you think. And we've already had a decade of that, where the algorithms of social media have changed our social structures immensely. And if we get to the next one, where some big AI company controls what we think and what information we have, that's not a good place to be. But also, as you said, Marcel, if we compete, we're going to see great advancements. We'll wake up and go, geez, we need to make that better. And Canadians have been insulated for a long time. We've been running an economy that is straight out of the 1970s. We still think we're a manufacturing economy with natural resources. And we're a service economy, if you actually take a look at the numbers. And guess what's the easiest thing to replace using AI? Service economies. The ones that are going to survive the best are going, actually, believe it or not, the economies are based on pure manufacturing or pure, and even that's going to be, or natural resources that nobody else can get. That's, you're going to be much more insulated than you are if you're a service economy.
Oh, blip. You're calling me a blip? Anyway,
No,
I was just saying it's so hard. Like in some ways, it's so much fun to have this amount of stuff coming down the pipe all the time. And it gives us an excuse to get together once a week and just shoot the poo. There you go. See, you don't have to bleep that one out. About all the cool things that are coming down. And yet we barely ever manage to scratch the surface. And when we were talking about this a couple of days ago, oh, we should get together and do a roundup of where everything is at the moment. We're not even close to getting there.
no.
And if we did the roundup 2 days ago, it would have been different today.
But still, I think that you need to step back. Yeah, it does keep changing, because I was going to think about some of the things, like we could talk about video, and then this thing from ByteDance came in and went and blew everything up. So you're right. It's hard to stay in touch with all of this, but the past 2 weeks have been absolutely insane.
We're not talking about Trump and Elon here.
My wife is now obsessed with what's happening politically in the US, because a lot of people are mad. And she'll bring me this stuff and say, did you see he said this? Did you see he said this? And I'm going, I'm trying to keep up with AI. And I'm still passionate about what's happening in Canada, and you should be. But it's just, I don't know when you explode. So that should be our mantra, because I think you gave the best advice, Marcel, for the next week. We will get to our catch up next week. My takeaway from this is people need to have some fun. Yeah.
Totally. And in fact, can we give homework? Let's give homework to the people out there. Okay. First of all, you're going to post it and you're going to let me know when it's posted. And then I'm going to put the Discord link, and then we're going to pin that to the top so people can find the Discord link, or it'll be in the description, one or the other. And then homework for the audience, make something fun that we can share. Okay.
Yeah.
So make something fun. Go and have some fun and make something fun and share it with us.
If you go back to, I think it was our first episode of Project Synapse, one of the things that we talked about was that you have to play. And so we're going back full circle to play and have fun and learn what you can do with the tools.
And that's our show. Yeah.
All right, let me do it again.
Okay.
You come to me.
Yeah. Okay. So have fun and share it with us there. John Penard, thank you very much.
No problem. Always fun having a chat with the two of you.
Marcel Gagnier, thank you very much. This has been marvelous as always.
Yeah, I always have a blast with you guys. Let's keep doing this.
And if you've actually stayed this long, and if the discussion isn't working for you, drop some comments. If it is working for you, let us know. The numbers look good, so we think that we're sharing something with you that's real and interesting. So please just let us know in the comments, and we'll be glad to respond to them. That's the show. Thank you very much. Project Synapse will probably appear again next week.
Live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. That's our show. Thanks a lot. I'm Jim Love. Have a great week.